utility data access update. We know that utility data access is really important to multifamily partners because it's sort of at the core of a lot of the data issues that we've been facing. And we're really excited to show what resources and opportunities are out there to help partners better work with their utilities and get that data that we've been looking for. So this is the third in our series, and it's the third that we've planned. So there won't be any more multifamily data webinars for the time being, but some more webinars are in the pipeline, so I'm sure you'll be hearing from us in the next few months, certainly. All right, so just to get some basics out of the way, my name is Tyler Fitch. I've been doing multifamily data with the Better Buildings Challenge for, I guess, a year and a half, and I'll be giving the webinar today, and Chantel Key is also with me, and she'll be moderating and handling some of the WebEx logistics. So just to give some objectives really quickly, what we're going to do today is review nationwide utility progress towards getting that data to partners. So that's going to cover the policies that affect those utilities, some of the more recent developments in terms of which utilities are getting data, and the tools that are out there to help you find those utilities and succeed in your benchmarking efforts with them. And then second, I guess we already mentioned this, but we'll be learning about best practices in cases where utilities might not be cooperating in ways that, or they may not be able to cooperate, or for other reasons getting that data might be difficult. So before we go any farther, I'm going to turn it over to Chantel, who's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the WebEx basics. Or excuse me, GoToWebinar basics. No problem.
Thanks, Tyler. So for those of you that are joining us today with the audio through your telephone, we ask that you ask questions in two ways. One way is that you can click the raise your hand icon right next to your name. So you can raise your hand and notify us that you have a question, and then at designated times throughout the webinar, we can unmute you and you can ask your question verbally. Again, there's two ways if you are joining us today with the audio through your telephone. One is to raise your hand, and the other is to type your question in the question box. And again, at designated times throughout the webinar, we will read your question out loud, and we will answer it at that time as well. If you're joining us today with the audio through your computer, we ask that you ask your question by typing in your question through the question box, and at different times in the webinar, we'll get to your question during those times.
Great. Thanks, Chantel.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. So just to sort of get things rolling and make sure that we understand how this questions box is going to operate, it would be really helpful if some of the attendees could just type in a name of one of the utilities they work with in some or all of their properties and send it out. I just want to be able to get you as the attendees a little more familiar with what that's going to look like and how you can respond in sort of real time. And one other thing I'll say about this before we really get going is that you should feel free to ask questions throughout this process, and we'll cover them at pre-designated times in the webinar. Okay, I see a couple of responses here. BG&E, PG&E, Eversource. That's great. Thank you very much. And feel free to continue responding other attendees as we go. So continue to ask questions as they come up for you, and we will answer them as we get to specific parts of the webinar. All right. Just to cover a quick agenda for today, we're going to introduce data access, what challenges are for partners and what challenges are for utilities. We'll go into what progress has been made so far and by what actors. We'll cover what the landscape sort of looks like right now in terms of which utilities are offering data and what you can do if your utility isn't offering data. And finally, we'll look ahead in terms of what forces are acting on utilities. Are they likely to move towards data access and aggregation, things like that. So those are the 5 that we'll be sort of looking at today. All right, so just as a brief introduction, I know that this is something that may seem repetitive from previous webinars, but I think it's important to sort of explicitly state at the beginning of each. What we're looking for Better Buildings Challenge data submissions is data for annual data across a baseline year as well as the most recent year, usually a calendar year, but not always. And optimally, we'd like that data to cover the entire building for each building in your portfolio. So that includes owner and tenant paid data. There have been recognition for just owner paid data in the past, and we are excited to recognize those partners that give us that data, but the Better Buildings Challenge is a leadership organization, and we'd love to see more owner paid and tenant paid data displayed on the Better Buildings Challenge. All right. So the utilities have some challenges with this as well. And I've just listed 4 little bullets here that sort of indicate what they might be dealing with that might cause them to not give the aggregate data as easily as we might like. And the first, and I think this is the biggest one, is tenant privacy. There's a fairly common sense line of thought that says that tenants don't have to disclose this data to third parties because it represents what they do in their units. It could be a safety concern, and in general, a lot of times utilities don't feel comfortable releasing that tenant's data to a third party. And oftentimes, utilities will have procedures to get around tenant privacy in the form of tenant authorization forms or green leases or things like that. But that's sort of the first barrier to getting good aggregated data. The second is there can be technical limitations in infrastructure. The grid continues to evolve but slowly, and utilities may have ways of tracking energy usage that aren't easy to aggregate. Or if a building has more than one address, it might be difficult to sort of coordinate all of those across the different addresses of the building. Going along with that, some of them suffer from not keeping energy usage data or entries for too long. So if you're looking to get data in your baseline that's in 2010, say, your utility might not have that data, or possibly more likely, a tenant may have moved out of their apartment in the last 5 years, say, and their authorization might not reach back that far. So that's sort of a technical issue both for partners and for utilities. And then finally, there's sort of a quickly developing regulatory environment here where I think California is sort of the leader here. CPUC, I believe, is the name of the acronym for California Public Utilities. And they're looking at whether they can set a rule for when data is allowed to be released and when it's not. So in some cases, utilities' hands might be tied by those sorts of regulations. All right. So progress so far. This is a big slide, and I just wanted to open this up to show a couple different avenues by which we're making progress on this issue. And the first one is that Energy Data Accelerator you see in the top right. This is an accelerator, is a group of stakeholders put together by the Better Buildings Challenge, or specifically the Better Buildings Alliance inside the Better Buildings program. It's a set of 37 cities and utilities working together, having meetings, and finding solutions for getting aggregated energy data into the hands of partners like yourselves. So this has involved meetings over the last few years, sponsoring a couple of resolutions by other groups, and they'll be coming out with a toolkit shortly, is what they've told me, that will give some more data or some more tools and resources for partners to work with their utilities to get that data. So we're very excited about that one. We think dividends are coming back on the Energy Data Accelerator quickly. The second is there's been some sort of federal government action. The most visible one there is the November 2014 open letter to utilities that Secretary Castro from HUD wrote. So this was available on the Better Buildings Challenge website for a while. It's available on the HUD website, and it's an open letter addressed to utilities asking them to provide this type of data. And this is the type of advocacy that we hope that the Better Buildings Challenge contributes to get utilities to move on this. Similarly, you see the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates there. They passed a resolution in 2013 supporting automated benchmarking of multifamily buildings. The idea there being that this is an advocacy group that's pushing towards getting utilities to disclose aggregated data. And then the last two are, again, back in the sort of Better Buildings family. We've been giving webinars and other resources on best practices for working with utilities since at least July 2014, when we put together a sort of set of best practices for getting data in the multifamily sphere. That webinar, which is online, included best practices from a couple of multifamily partners who found success with basically just calling and contacting their utility, working with them and getting data, getting results. So I encourage you, if you have any sort of thoughts on that, to go back to this or to sort of look up pathways to meeting your energy data commitment and looking over that presentation. And then what I've been sort of hard at work on has been the multifamily sampling protocol and other multifamily tools to get partners to more easily display the savings that their energy is showing. So that includes the multifamily sampling protocol as well as the partial data display, things like that. So across these, we have Better Buildings family working together to get tools into the hands of partners, as well as government actors and sort of non-governmental advocacy actors working towards getting utilities to release that data. All right, so now we're going to move into what sort of what the fruits of that labor are. So what I have here is a spreadsheet that came out in December 2015, last month, that Energy Star released regarding their portfolio manager tool. And it's a list of utilities that all provide aggregated data to them right now. And it's longer than you might think. So I'm just going to put it up on the screen here. All right, so it's a PDF. It's absolutely available to the public online. And it essentially lists in this table form here I would say over 30 utilities that are providing aggregated data directly into Portfolio Manager. We've struggled to put together lists of utilities like this in the past, and lists, I assure you, have been much smaller than these 30. So we're pretty excited to see all of these together in one place. And we think that this is a great sort of reference list for partners to see, okay, do I have properties in these states? Can I work with these utilities to get data? And just to get into some of the basics, you see this aggregate whole building data, which is sort of what we're looking for. In a lot of these, they say yes, which indicates they aggregate across accounts. And you'll see there's two numbers there. And this is a common thing in energy data access. I'll just zoom in on Excel Energy here. So they say 4/50. And this is the type of tenant privacy rule that I think we'll see more and more as more utilities get into this game. The 4 represents how many tenants have to be in a building before they're able to release the data. So if they're less than 4, they feel like that's the sort of threshold for privacy. And the second number is percentage. So if any given tenant is using over 50% of that building's data, then again, it sort of violates a privacy sort of benchmark. So keeping these two numbers together and sort of cross-referencing those with your portfolio, you might be able to find, which of your properties in Southern California, for instance, satisfy this rule, and thus you'd be able to get data from. You'll see there is a multifamily included here, which shouldn't surprise some of us because multifamily data certainly has extra hurdles from time to time. But I think there is a lot of subscription to getting multifamily data out there, which is really encouraging. And finally, there's a list of contacts, which I think is really great. So if you want to contact Carla Day at LA DWP, then you're totally able to do that. So I definitely encourage partners on the line to download this spreadsheet. It's linked in the presentation, and take a look. I think it's going to be really useful for us moving forward. I've also listed something else here, the Energy Data Access Database that ACEEE runs. That's also useful. It is not organized in a way that's as easy to use as the spreadsheet I just showed you, and it's slightly less current. But I think it's, again, a nice thing to check in on, and it also includes some information about local policies that I think are useful in this case. Okay, So just really quickly, I'm going to go into what aggregated data might look like in terms of Portfolio Manager. So I've just got, and yeah, just bear with me here. I've just got a example property here, Benchmark Towers, which we've used before. And if I go to the meters tab, what I'll see is, for instance, for electricity, we might have 4 tenant meters that are all separate. And what the utility would provide is one single aggregate electricity meter that if we went into the actual details, would show monthly totals for the whole property. So this type of thing sort of takes that, some of the clerical work of getting all of those meters together, takes it out. So we think that's a really helpful tool. And I know that a lot of partners have been struggling with the sort of heavy lift that is working with a lot of different meters and a lot of months. So getting this aggregated data not only allows you to sort of bypass the paper trail, but hopefully it'll also save a lot of work, and we're pretty excited about that. All right. So just to give a visual of what this is going to look like, I pulled from the OpenEI database, which it stands for Open Energy Information. It's run by the Department of Energy. And they provide these pretty cool maps, I think, of the United States, and they show where energy data access is across the United States. So while looking at that table, you might not be able to see, I think this map provides a much better sort of sense of where that data is available. One thing I'll say as a limitation is access to data here is defined very broadly, and it might not be appropriate, especially for multifamily partners. It may be very difficult to get actual data out of there. So what I'd encourage is sort of take a grain of salt with this particular map. And just because I have it here, I'm just going to put this on screen as well. I'd encourage you to check this out also. So you can see this is for residential customers. We can pick, say, access to data as our map, and there it is. This green button is sort of interesting because it shows which utilities have committed to energy data access. And so this is a map, but as we can see when we turn on this green button, we get lots of coverage. I mean, pretty much all of California, much of the eastern seaboard. It's pretty exciting to take a look at this. So I encourage you, if you are curious, to just drop into it. All right, so now we've gotten to our first poll, and Chantel, I think I need your help here, so if you can sort of put this out to the attendees, that'd be great.
Okay, the polls are now open.
Okay, thanks. And I'll just read out the question. I think we all see it together. But what portion of your portfolio is covered by utilities offering data access? So from what you've seen, I think basically if your portfolio lies in California or on the West Coast, on the East Coast, or near Chicago, or in a couple other places, it's likely that you'll get some access. So I definitely encourage you to respond. What we're looking for really is just a ballpark. So if you feel like you're not sure, I encourage you to just pick one. And let's see, do we have any questions? Again, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to send that through the box. Or there's also a raised hand function for people on the phone. So feel free to do that as well. We're happy to open up the line for people like that. Okay. So it looks like 72% have come in. I would just ask, yeah, and participation in these polls is it's really helpful for us because it allows us to sort of continue to customize these presentations towards what partners are likely to use. So when we get responses from partners, it allows us to see what's going on out in the field, and through that sort of bracket what partners are interested in seeing, et cetera. So we really appreciate that we've had such good turnout on these polls, and we hope that continues. All right, Chantal, I think it's reasonable that we could close it. Okay. Thanks, Chantal. So this is actually pretty encouraging. What we're seeing is that most or all of the portfolio are in these areas where utilities are offering data access. That's great news. So we're hoping that through Portfolio Manager and through working with those utilities, getting that data for your whole property could be fairly easy. And this might be a topic for a different webinar that we'll go into later, but benchmarking has benefits, or whole building benchmarking has benefits in terms of tenant comfort, tenant cost, all kinds of things. So getting the ability to benchmark on these buildings is huge, and it's exciting to see that partners have that capability in their hands, and we're excited to continue to work with you. One thing I didn't mention at the top, but I'd like to say quickly, is that David Rusciero is online. If any of his partners have any questions, they can feel free to ask, and I think he can pipe up and respond. And Amy Ross, I think, may be here for some of the time, but I'm happy to answer questions on her behalf if that comes up. Yeah, David, if you want to, yeah, thanks for being on this webinar. I don't know if you have any words for anybody.
Just hello and Happy New Year, and send me your data. That's all I have to say. So
that's
ask away.
Thanks, David. And that'll be that'll be a recurring refrain, I think, among members of the Better Buildings Challenge in the next couple of months is send me your data. So I guess look forward to that. All right, let's jump back in. All right, so now we're going to cover. Oh, sure.
Did you see the one question in the question box?
Let's see. I have not. Can you read it for me?
Sure. I marked that our portfolio has data access, but I would like to highlight that it's not aggregated.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Right, so in those cases, yeah, that's something that we sort of anticipated, is that aggregating can be difficult. I think ComEdison in the Midwest had a system of the energy use data system that gave energy data but did not aggregate it. So your options there are I guess it sort of comes down to what I did before, which is try to get authorization from as many tenants as possible. And then if sampling is the way to go from there, then go for it. But having the ability to get that data access is sort of a huge first step, and I think it's really encouraging that you've already gotten that leg up. And feel free to contact myself or David or anyone else after the call. If you are facing any obstacles or anything like that you'd like guidance on, we're absolutely resources for you to use to better your benchmarking campaign and strategy. All right, thank you, Chantal. So coming back to this, if your utility does not offer aggregated data, what do you do? So given what we saw in the poll that we just ran, most attendees on the phone, their portfolio is partially covered by utilities offering aggregated data. So this is something that we've been excited about recently. We're allowing partners to take that portion of their portfolio that is covered by those utilities and call that sort of the portion of their portfolio or their commitment that they'd like to move forward on. And then they would publish a partial data display on the website. So if partners would like to do this, all they need to do is sort of specify which portion of their portfolio they're moving forward on, and then work with us on those particular properties. And if we do that, then we'll be able to move forward with publishing on the website and sort of getting one of those showcases knocked out. One of those milestones knocked out. So we definitely think that's a good option, and we would encourage partners to take it if that's sort of something on the table for them. It sounds like from the poll that it is, so I think this is a really exciting option. Second, and this is a very text-heavy slide, which I would just sort of remind everyone that this presentation will go out. It will be available online, so if you'd like to download it and sort of look through these links yourself, feel free. That's one of the reasons why there are a number of hyperlinks in here, is so that it will be a resource to partners. But what we found is that in cases where the utility doesn't offer aggregated data, we've talked with, I guess, over 4 or 5 partners that have contacted their utility, sometimes through their account manager, other times just through a corporate customer service line. And just through those conversations have gotten to the point where they can get aggregated data access. Obviously, this has some level of effort associated with it, just because any person-to-person communication does. But we've been surprised by the sort of rate of return on talking to utilities directly. In lots of cases, they might be encouraged to help out someone when they have a personal relationship. So we'd say this is a really good step to take. So who to contact? As I mentioned, utilities may have account managers with large multifamily organizations. So I would definitely look into that. But if there's a corporate customer service number, that's also a great place to start. Just to give some specific language for partners that want it, what we're looking for is annual aggregated whole property energy data. I think that format will provide the data in the sort of best shape and the way that we want it as the Better Billings Challenge. So in the cases where it's possible to get that, I would definitely encourage going for it. As we sort of saw, aggregated can be an issue. But even if you can get annual energy data, that's still pretty solid and should help. If not, if we can't get that data from the utilities, we sort of revert back to our old bag of tricks. So that's getting the tenant energy authorization form, it's doing sampling, it's things like that. And just because the utility can't offer the actual data, it doesn't mean they can't help us. So I would definitely reach out to them, think of them as a partner. Certainly energy data access is something that's on a lot of utilities' minds, and I think that they're excited to have case studies just like we are. So in cases where you can get them to partner with you and sort of figure out what the best practice for everyone is, that's the case where everyone wins. Like I mentioned earlier, the challenge is a national leadership organization. So think of yourselves as people who are sort of blazing the way for energy data access. And reaching out and making those personal relationships is a great way to do that. So as you can see, there's 2 resources at the bottom here. Best practices for working with utilities from ACEEE and that open utility letter and energy authorization form from HUD. So both of those I think will be really useful and instrumental in getting sort of sample forms in front of the utility and making the case for data access, which I think is really important. All right. Okay, so now we're going to move to our second poll. So Chantel, feel free to sort of launch that whenever. And this is just another question that we're sort of curious about in our audience is, does your organization have an account manager with your utility? What we've found in the commercial and public sectors is that oftentimes they will have sort of corporate relationships with their utilities. And I think what we're looking for here is how prevalent is that relationship among multifamily as well. Okay, and again, really thank you for being attentive and getting on these polls and giving us this information, because at the end of the day, having this info is what allows us to help multifamily partners as best we can. And these polls are, I think they've been really useful for us. So I appreciate everyone who's putting their response in. And again, I would just like to encourage attendees to ask those questions in the list, because I think answering those direct questions is something that we consider these webinars to be an opportunity to do. So definitely a great option. Okay.
About 59% of our attendees have voted. Would you like me to close it?
Um, oh, it just jumped up to 65, which is great. Yeah, okay, let's just go ahead and close it. Thank you, Chantal. All right, so I think what you should be seeing on your screen is the breakdown. And this is actually great information to have. In a lot of cases, it looks like partners do not have that personal relationship with their utility. So that means there are opportunities to grow those and to make progress. While those relationships are helpful, it's exciting to think that we'll be able to build those in the near future. And again, I guess if you have any questions about that or best practices, or even want some backup on the phone, I think that the account managers and myself are definitely here to help in that regard. Interestingly, there were only account managers in billing. There was nobody in the middle, sort of. And there were 18%, which is yes, which is a pretty substantial amount. So those people, I'd actually be curious to sort of talk with you or get your input on how helpful those account managers have been. So if you want to sort of include that in the questions box, if you'd like to ask that, feel free, because I think the people who might not have account managers might be curious, and they might benefit from knowing what services are available that way. All right. So continuing on, now we're just going to cover quickly, so strategies for cases where that data isn't available. So your utility isn't cooperating, or you've called them and you've gotten the voicemail, what's next? And here's 3 basic strategies, and I'll add in a sort of caveat at the end. First, benchmark a portion of your portfolio where whole building data is more available. So I talked about this already. This is the partial data display. And we think this is a great option, even for partners who say feel like they have data access across their whole portfolio, but there might be some issues with most of it. The partial data display and working towards benchmarking on a portion of their portfolio allows them to sort of pilot project their own benchmarking initiative. So they can say, we'll work on this, substantial portion, 30% of our portfolio. We can even use it as sort of a test case against everything else. So once we get that data, what does that tell us about this 30%? When we get savings, how does it compare to the other 70%, things like that. We think that the partial data display is a great tool for partners, and we're excited to work with them as they begin to use it. If that's not an option, then basically the last partner we have to partner with is the tenants themselves. So this can mean facility managers and door-to-door sort of work, but that's sort of the way that we make progress is through that type of work. So some sample tenant authorization forms are available through HUD. They're also available on greenleaselibrary.com. We would definitely encourage you to pick one of those up. Just take a look at it, work with your utility on what language works best, and get out there. And in those cases, you don't have to get every tenant. You just have to get enough to satisfy our sampling protocol. So these last 2 strategies sort of work in tandem. And something that David mentioned to me just recently was that it's possible to get data without working directly with your utilities. Things like smart meters or other strategies are ways to use hardware or software solutions. Service and product providers can also do this. It allows you to get that data together in cases where you don't have to specifically work with your utility on this. So if you're in a place where utilities aren't working for you, I would definitely encourage that as sort of the nuclear option. Right. Okay. So with that, what we're going to cover at the end here. Oh, okay, so we have a question from Sean Thornton here that I'm just going to read out. He asks, how did that 18% set up a relationship with the utility to get an account manager? That's not something I have specific experience on, but I think it would be valuable if another partner wants to chime in, or yeah, if anyone has any insight on that. Responding through the questions, or even saying that you'd like to speak through the questions thing, would be great. Again, how did those partners with utility account managers get to the point where they could get that? Thank you, Sean. All right. So what we're going to cover at the end here is what utility data access might look like in the future. So we're going to cover what forces are working on them and what we think is likely to sort of come out of that. So let's jump in. So this is a map put together by the Institute for Market Transformation, which is an advocacy and research group dedicated towards energy efficiency in buildings. And this map shows benchmarking and energy disclosure policies across the United States. So as you can see, there's a legend here. Sometimes it's commercial multifamily, sometimes it's public, sometimes it's single family. Things sort of run the gamut. And I'm not going to count here because there are too many, but a number of the large cities across the country have worked to sort of implement these types of policies. And you can see that many states have too. And some of them not even in particular spaces where we would expect to see sort of a particular source of innovation. So places in the Midwest like Minnesota and South Dakota, Kansas, they're sort of leading the way. Those are ones I was slightly surprised by, but I think it's exciting to see that state and local municipalities are sort of working on this. And I bring this slide up just to show that utilities aren't the only actors in this sort of realm. Not only there are utilities, there are concerned customers, and there are public entities like states and municipalities. And many of them, they have their eyes on energy benchmarking and data access. One success story I can point to is Cambridge, Massachusetts, started their energy disclosure in I think they started in 2014, their energy disclosure ordinance. And they worked with their utility, Eversource, and Eversource put together an aggregate data portal, and it's worked great in the first year. I think they've had something like an over 90% response rate. And it's because they've worked with their utility and they've made those things happen. So this is sort of a testament to the power of working together with these different stakeholders. And I think it's a sort of exciting, an exciting herald of things to come. So just to run through a quick list of what we're looking at, there are federal initiatives that have come up. We saw HUD's open utility letter, but in addition to that, August 2015, the White House announced that they were rapidly expanding the finance available to home efficiency projects. They announced partnerships with a number of organizations, all kinds of things. We already mentioned the state and local benchmarking policies like Cambridge. And I think an important one to sort of harp on is customer interest and leadership is a big deal. So just to say it for the third time this webinar, the Better Buildings Challenge is a leadership organization. And action by partners with utilities is the way that we make progress here. So we think there's a real opportunity to get in the trenches and make things happen. And then finally, there are national advocacy efforts happening. The Institute for Market Transformation runs a data initiative, which unfortunately I cannot remember the specific letters of that acronym, but it's again another organization based on getting utilities to offer that aggregated data access. And I'll just mention again the Energy Data Accelerator, which is a partnership of utilities and towns. So that's sort of, they're right in the, they're proof that utilities are cooperating. Utilities want to see what the future holds for energy data. All right. So we're nearing the end of the webinar, and I'd like to thank everyone for holding on, and I hope that this has been helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. We're going to just go through a couple more slides here, and then I'll hopefully ask a couple questions from the crowd, and then hopefully we can maybe get out a little early and save some of our Tuesday afternoon. Well, I guess hopefully we have enough questions that we can stay a little late, but it all depends. So, as I mentioned before, we want this presentation to be a resource for partners. We want it to link them to resources that they'd like to use across organizations, things that we found that we think partners would find useful. So I've sort of organized them here. Which utilities are making progress? We looked at the utility access fact sheet, and we looked at the OpenEI mapping tool. We did not look at this utility data access database, but I think it would be useful as well. So as a place to start, does your utility do this? These three sites are good places to start. Second, when you're working with utilities, what do you do? And again, we've covered these two in a little bit of detail throughout. HUD sent the Open Utility Letter in 2014. And ACEEE sent their best practice for working with utilities. I believe that's in 2013. And then there's also a series of sample energy authorization forms in the Green Lease library to look at as well. And just as a sneak peek, the Energy Data Accelerator is planning on releasing a utility toolkit, which will hopefully contain resources and tools for partners to work with their utilities. I'm not sure on the details on that yet, but I know that work is sort of wrapping up on it. So I'm excited to see what that holds, and I think it'll be useful for partners. All right, so you've likely seen this slide before, tools for benchmarking success with the Brad Billings Challenge. What tools have we developed that we think will help partners with however their data is right now? So there's a number of tools to use here. The Bear Billings Challenge Data Tracking Manual is something that has been around for a little while, but there's three below: the Portfolio Inventory Workbook, the Sampling Protocol, and the Partial Data Display are things that David and I have sort of put our heads together to make for the purposes of Bear Billings Challenge partners. And these are all available from your account manager. And then the previous webinars, I think hopefully are helpful. If you missed those, the recording is available online. And I would just like to stress that partners are sort of all going through this energy data issue together. And in cases where one partner progresses, I think it might be useful to tell other partners what's been going on, what's been helpful. So I would definitely recommend that you reach out to your account manager and other partners as you either experience successes or challenges along the way. All right, just as a final note here, the Bear Billings Summit is coming up. It's May 9th through 11th, 2016. I'm not sure how many of you attended the summit last year, but it's a great opportunity to get face-to-face with other partners, with service providers, with public entities, get to meet your account manager in person, get to see the beautiful city of DC, and it's also the place where we recognize partners for their progress over the last year. So this means 2015 data. January 1st through December 31st, 2015 data. So the criteria this year for multifamily is something that we're actively working on now, and we expect that we'll be releasing the specifics of recognition fairly soon. But what I can say is that, like for all sectors, if you can get whole building energy data for your baseline and current over your commitment square footage, then you will absolutely be able to get recognized for that. So this is sort of the brass ring, and we'll provide some other opportunities soon. So data submissions formally begin in mid-March, but if you have any questions, or you're just getting started, or you're already done, feel free to reach out to your account manager and ask them, does this look good? What can I do to better my data submission, things like that. Amy and David and I are sort of hungry to work with partners on this, so just feel free to reach out. And I guess that's what I've said at the bottom here is feel free to reach out to your account manager or myself. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes the content planned for this webinar. At the end here are just the contact information for your account manager, as well as myself, and a general line for contacting the Better Billings Challenge. So if you have any questions, it looks like no more have come up through the questions pane, but if you have anything, feel free to ask now, and we'll cover it. Otherwise, I would say thank you for participating in the Better Billings Challenge or the Multifamily webinar series. The 3 webinars that we've covered have been on the sampling protocol, renewable energy and renewables. Oh my gosh, renewable energy and water, and this one on utility data access. And we think those 3 have all covered aspects that are important to partners to understand, and I think that it's been useful. So those recordings are available online, as well as PDFs. Just feel free to ask myself or David or Amy, and we can get those into your hands. And it looks like you're still waiting for questions from the audience. But yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and close this out. And I'd just like to say thank you for listening today, and I hope it's been useful. And just one more plea, I guess. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about anything. Happy to go into it with you. Happy to assist multifamily partners in succeeding with their benchmarking initiative. All right, that's all I got. Thank you.